We good? All right. It is Tuesday night. That means it's time for Second Look Study. And we are looking at how the book of Revelation uses, repurposes the Old Testament. We're not dabbling in what some people think of as an end-time calendar or any of that sort of thing. We're not even hitting the harem-scarum parts on purpose. But what we are doing is finding out, and this takes a little longer, tracing down why do certain Old Testament passages, little snippets of passages, little bits and pieces, never an entire verse quoted, never an introductory remark made about it, an attribution, here this is from Daniel, thus saith Isaiah, or anything like that, like some of the other New Testament writers, but there is more Old Testament in Revelation than all of the other New Testament books combined, because what John does is he repurposes. He takes images, pictures, words, concepts, events, people, and he never pulls them out of context. He keeps them in context, but he will pull them out. But what he does do that's unique in repurposing is he will gather all these pieces together. And we're going to see a passage tonight, Revelation 7. We're going to begin there. We're going to see a passage tonight that we could spend several weeks if we wanted to run down every one of those allusions, every one of those cases where he takes a bit of this and a bit of that, a bit of Ezekiel, a bit of Daniel, a bit of Hosea, a bit of here and there, and puts it all together in chapter 7. Now, he does this for a reason. It's because he's seeing things he doesn't have a vocabulary for. Nobody does. And so he borrows the Old Testament because he's familiar with it, and his first hearers would have been familiar with it. We are less familiar with it, so it takes us longer, but we are getting there. But he does this because he wants us to see something. So what we've been doing is chasing down some of the whys. Why does he want us to see that? So anyway, we've got a study guide here. Matthew, were you able to put it up on Messenger? Okay, so if you are watching online, if you want to go and you're part of our Alta Vista Messenger chat, you can access it there, the study guide for tonight. It's a 2-pager, if you've got a physical copy here. Don't think we'll get through it all, so this will be part of next week, which will be just fine, because what we're going to do will naturally fall into 2 sections. You'll see as we get into it. And we're talking about the 144,000, and we won't finish tonight, and you'll see how it naturally falls into 2 sections. Where we left off last week, chapter 6, is we had all this imagery of falling stars, all this talk about falling stars. And where we settled, because of the way John repurposes the Old Testament and the text that he chooses to use, we came to realize that he's not talking about astronomy. He's not talking about planets crashing into each other. He's talking about, with all this fallen star language, it's all references to divine beings. Those kind of fallen stars, rebellious divine beings that now are getting their judgment that was first talked about in Psalm 82, where Yahweh assembles his divine council, the B'nai Elohim, and we will see them again tonight, the sons of God. He will assemble them and he takes them to task. He judges them because they have abused their power. Seemingly they have disadvantaged the most vulnerable people that they were in charge of. Remember, the idea is that these Elohim, there are many Elohim, no other Elohim is Yahweh, but they have been allotted different nations, different people groups that they were to help oversee. In some sense, they were to help God in this project, and they failed miserably. And so in Psalm 82, there is the warning of judgment. You will die like men. And that's what we begin to see in this language in chapter 6 that we looked at the last couple of weeks, this falling star language. Those are references to divine beings. And it's really a judgment of the corrupt sons of God, the corrupt B'nai Elohim. Okay? So that's where we've taken it up to. We've seen the opening of several seals in this legal document that you would expect to see in chapter 4 and 5. This scroll with the 7 seals shows up. That highlights the fact that what's going on in 4 and 5, it's a throne room scene, it's a divine council scene, it is a courtroom scene, and that is a classic picture that you see in the Old Testament where Yahweh calls court, and now defend yourself. And he has already passed judgment on his people. That's what chapters 2 and 3 are about. That's why in the letters to the 7 churches you see Jesus saying, I have this against you. It was a judgment against them. But if you clean it up, if you repent, most often he says, then you will be an overcomer. It seems in 4 and 5 that his churches have cleaned it up, and they are overcomers, and they are co-rulers with him, the white robes, the thrones, and all the rest. And they are part now of the divine council. We are part of the divine council. And so the courtroom is open for business. You have a legal document. And now it's not the judgment of God's people, it's the judgment of the nations. And that's what the remainder of the book of Revelation will drill down on, is the judgment of the nations. Okay? And that's what you see with all these cataclysms and disasters and all sorts of things. Anyway, so that's where we were. Let's take a look at where we're going. Chapter 7. We're going to talk about the 144,000. Spoiler alert. There is a lot of fog surrounding the 144,000. Probably in the last 160 years, there have been lots and lots of discussions, sermons, books, teaching series, traveling evangelists, speculation on the 144,000. There are some groups that are built on the presence of the 144,000. Jehovah's Witness. They ran into great trouble through the years trying to determine who the 144,000 were. And when Jesus would come back, they made multiple predictions. Finally, they realized that they had messed up, and so they said 1914 Jesus came back, but he wasn't visible. And the 144,000 are the Jehovah's Witnesses that were around in 1914. And they will be around until Jesus returns visibly. Well, guess what? They're all dead now. They're all gone. So they messed up. But there's always been a lot of speculation, as I say, a lot of fog around this whole 144,000. What we're going to see tonight is a few things that are very obvious. And knowing some of the things you're familiar with now, the Deuteronomy 32 worldview, the supernatural take that the readers and writers of the Bible had, it'll begin to click for you. And there are a few things that are going to be very, very obvious, and we'll focus on those. That'll be our focus tonight. So let's get started. Take a look in chapter 7, and let's just read through the first 8 verses really, but I want to tag on verse 9 because we'll come to it at the end and really get into it next week. So here it is. This is from the English Standard Version, which is pretty good overall. Chapter 7, after this this is John talking, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, that no wind might blow on earth or sea or against any tree. No wind. Then I saw another angel ascending from the right of the sun, seal of the living God, and he called with a loud voice to the 4 angels who had been given power to harm earth and sea, saying, do not harm the earth or the sea or the trees until we have, and here's our topic for tonight and next week, until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. And I heard the number of the sealed, 144,000 sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. Now you may or may not be aware that we arrive at the 144,000 with simple multiplication. 12,000 from each tribe. And then you get the list. 12,000 from the tribe of Judah were sealed. 12,000 from the tribe of Reuben. 12,000 from the tribe of Gad. You'll see in a moment why we're not skipping over this. 12,000 from the tribe of Asher. 12,000 from the tribe of Naphtali. 12,000 from the tribe of Manasseh, 12,000 from the tribe of Simeon, 12,000 from the tribe of Levi. Now, put a little mark by that, because that's a little curiosity that we'll come back to. 12,000 from the tribe of Issachar, 12,000 from the tribe of Zebulun, 12,000 from the tribe of Joseph. Put a little mark by that, because that's curious as well. 12,000 from the tribe of Benjamin were sealed. So there it is. Okay, that's our passage. So let's make a couple of just general observations here. Okay? What we've got here is the first of two passages that will deal with the 144,000. We're going to briefly touch on the other one tonight, and in a few weeks we'll come back to it and really look at it, but it kind of presents itself tonight as well. But there are two passages, two Revelation passages, that deal with this much talked about 144,000. And as I say, some things are obvious, but there's a lot of fog around some of it too. There are a number of questions that just our reading here would probably bring up to anybody who's even a little bit observant, and everybody here is very observant. Questions like, who are these people? The 144,000. Okay? Are we to understand this group literally or metaphorically? Okay? Is this really going to happen, or is this a picture of something that's going to happen? And that's what John is doing in repurposing here. Or is it a case of both? Because there are times when places in the Bible, we've even seen places in Revelation where it can be literal, but it can also be a picture, a word picture. And John is a master at that, repurposing word pictures so that it's metaphorical, but it's also literal. So maybe it's both. I don't know if you caught this, but one tribe is omitted, Dan. Why is Dan omitted? It's a bona fide tribe of Israel. It was, geographically, it settled way up in the north, in the area that we think of as the Golan Heights and that sort of place. A lush, even today, a still very lush area. So they lucked out. But why aren't they in this list? Did they do something? Did they offend? Why are they not in this list? But they're omitted. Another curiosity, and that's why I had you note the Joseph reference. Why are Joseph and Manasseh mentioned as tribes when we always see the pairing in the Old Testament of Manasseh and Ephraim, right? Which made up the tribe of Joseph. Remember the story of old man Jacob when he finally gets to Egypt, and one of his last conscious acts is to kind of, in his blessing, kind of adopt the two sons of Joseph as sons of Jacob, right? And he's asked to bless them, but he does the switcheroo with Ephraim and Manasseh, and Joseph says, "No, my father." He says, "Leave me alone, boy. I'm doing what I'm doing." It's all for a reason. Anyway, what that means is that you get the listing of Joseph in the tribes of Israel, but you get it under the heading of his sons. Joseph had two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, but they're always paired together, Ephraim and Manasseh, right? Even the way they settled, the half-tribe and all that. But they're always portrayed together. But what you've got in this listing is you've got a mention of Joseph, and you've also got a mention of Manasseh, but you don't have the mention of Ephraim. So what's the deal there? Okay? Why is there this tribal arrangement at all? Why are we seeing this 144,000, 12,000, 12,000, 12,000 of the tribes? And it's admittedly a scrambled listing, like we've said. Do they represent the church? Do they represent the 12 apostles? 12, see? So you could naturally think that. Are they especially protected during the time of, we call the apocalypse, all this chaos that's going to happen? Are they protected during that time that it runs its course? Anyway, those are all some questions that kind of swirl around all of this, okay? What is this listing all about, this 144,000? Now, some things will become obvious, and you may want to get this down, if we remember John's thinking. We've kind of got a little bit of a bead on how John thinks about some things, most especially how he thinks and appreciates the Old Testament, how he repurposes it. So we want to kind of keep that in the back of our mind. But let's just make some, before we dive in, because there are at least a couple things I want us to see tonight that really do stand out, that are obvious. But before we do that, just some real general things, some general observations here about what is going on with this listing. Is John is doing something, definitely doing something with the Old Testament. Okay? This isn't arbitrary. He's doing something. Okay? It's going to be our task to try and figure out what he's doing and what it is he wants us to see and notice. What is very obvious, and what we'll break down here, is you've got tribes, that's very obvious, and you've got numbers. Those are things that stand out. Now, what the numbers mean, why the adding up, that's all for later, but you've got tribes and numbers, that's very obvious. So we're going to go to that, okay, to the obvious. You've got this numbering that is featured a couple of times in the book of Numbers. That's where the book of Numbers, part of the Pentateuch, part of the Torah, the first 5 books, book of Moses. This is included when they talked about this is Moses. It included the book of Numbers, which gets its name from these numberings, okay, that we see here. So we're going to kind of lean in that direction, all right? And what we've got here is some kind of census taking place. Because that's what was going on in the book of Numbers. We will see tonight. It was a census. So the first thing that stands out, let's get into it, is this numbering, this census that's going on. Now, census taking was a fairly common form of list making. That's doesn't happen all the time in the Old Testament, but it happens enough. It's somewhat frequent. The census taking, it's a list making device that happens. You see it. So this is not the first time. Numbers is not the only time. So let's take a look, all right, and see this thing that stands out, this numbering, this census. Let's see if we can figure out why they did it and why John's repurposing this whole census, list-making, numbering thing. Take a look in Exodus 30. Somebody else take a look in 2 Kings 15. And we're going to see one reason that they did this census taking in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Scriptures. Okay? Who's got Exodus 30? And as I say, somebody else be ready with 2 Kings 15. Who's got Exodus 30? Elaine, go ahead.
The Lord also spoke to Moses, saying, when you take a census of the sons of Israel and number them, then each one of them shall give the man for his God to the Lord when you number them, so that there will be no plague among them when you number them.
Okay, so here we got a numbering. Let's get a little bit more information. Okay? It's sometime later, 2 Kings 15, 19 and 20. And let's see why they're numbering. Somebody read that one for us. 15, 19 through 20, 2 Kings.
The king of Syria came against the land, and Menahem gave Tool 1,000 talents of silver, so that his hand might be with him to strengthen the kingdom under his rule. And Menahem collected the money from Israel, from all the mighty men of wealth, from each man 50 shekels of silver to pay the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria returned and did not stay there in the land.
Okay, so we're trying to figure out if this is census taking, and it's certainly numbering, this list making that's going on in Revelation 7, If it's census taking, what's the purpose of the census? Well, in this case, Exodus 30, 2 Kings 15, the purpose was taxation. Okay? Sometimes you would take a census for the purpose of collecting revenue. Okay? We kind of still do that every 10 years, and it causes us to redistrict and a whole bunch of stuff. So that's an idea that's still with us. And that's one of the reasons you would take a census, and that's what we just saw here. What we've got in Revelation 7, I think we can rule that one out. Okay? But I wanted you to see that there are multiple reasons why you would take a census. There's another reason, number 2, 2 Chronicles 2, 17 through 18. For those that are watching online, want to look it up. 2 Chronicles 2, 17, 18. 1 Kings 5, 13 through 18. And somebody read that 2 Chronicles 2 for us. Who's got it? Anybody called it up? Eldon, do you have it handy? Anybody got it handy?
Solomon took a census of all the foreigners residing in Israel. After the census, his father David had taken, and they were found to be 153,600. He assigned 70,000 of them to be carriers and 80,000 to be stone cutters in the hills, with 3,600 foremen over them to keep the people working.
Anybody remember what Solomon's, and I'm sure you do, his big civic building project was? His temple. His temple. And then after that, his own house, his palace. But the temple is what's being talked about here. That was his first big building project. So he's counting the people for the purpose of construction here. How about 1 Kings 5, 13 through 18? Gets a little more pointed in this description.
Then King Solomon raised up a labor force out of all Israel, and the labor force was 30,000 men. And he sent them to Lebanon, 10,000 a month in ships. They were 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Adoram was in charge of the labor force. Solomon had 70,000 who carried burdens and 80,000 who carried stone in the mountains.
The mention of the foreman and some even like this guy by name, it doesn't carry a lot of meaning for us because we don't know the man. We don't know any of those people. But it does highlight that what we've got here actually happened. That's why these lists were made. So it was an historical record. But anyway, what we've got here in 2 Chronicles 2 and 1 Kings 5, and as I say, 1 Kings 5 is a little more detailed, is you would do a census, you would do a numbering for the purpose of labor conscription. You were enlisting people in this project as laborers. In this case, 30,000 of you in shifts are to go up to Lebanon, which is up north of Israel. We hear a little bit about Lebanon right now, don't we? Well, there were huge forests, old-growth forests of cedars in Lebanon. That's why on the national flag of Lebanon today, there is a picture of a cedar tree. It was famous for its cedar. And Hiram, the king up there, was friends with David and friends with his son Solomon. And they had a working agreement that we will supply you all the wood you want. Cedar didn't grow like in Israel like it grew in Lebanon. And so they would cut it down, they would mill it, and then they shipped it by ship down the Mediterranean coast, and then they carried it to Jerusalem for the inside of the temple and some other things. So that's what you've got here. So what we're talking about is labor conscription. Now, go to our Revelation 7. Is that what John is doing here? It doesn't seem so. There's no mention of a project. Not like that. Okay? But again, I just wanted you to see that it's a very common thing, this census taking, this numbering of the people. It's this kind of list making. It happens in the Old Testament. Numbers 3, And we're going to skip this one. You can read that on your own. It's a longer passage. But what's being talked about in Numbers 3, again, there's a reason why we call it the book of Numbers. This is one of them. And Numbers 3, that all the way into chapter 4, it's laying out the duties and the social structure of the Levites. Think of them as their cultic duties, their jobs in the temple. Okay? Here's what they're to do. And there were different companies of them. You had people that did this part of the work, and people that did this. There was a division of labor to the point that by the time you get to Jesus' day, and we see one of the members of the Levite caste, the priestly caste, Zechariah, will become the father of John the Baptist, and it says that he was a member of one of the 24 courses that took their time. They took a time slot every year, every calendar year, to do their work in the temple because there was this division of labor. So what you've got here in Numbers 3, I'll let you read it later on, too long, is you got a passage that's laying out the duties of the Levites. But it's also the reason they're numbered is it's laying out the social structure of the Levites. They were different than any other tribe. They were not allotted land. They were treated differently. Part of the temple tithe went for their upkeep, for their food, for their needs. So they were in a different category. So you get a numbering just of the Levites here for the purpose of making sure we get everything in the temple taken care of. We don't have any overlap. We don't have any gaps. But also their structure as their own special society. Okay? Number 4, and we'll not read it either. It's 2 passages, Ezra 2, Nehemiah 7, if you're home and want to jot that down. Ezra 2, Nehemiah 7, you can read it later. But what we've got there with this kind of numbering is determining your Israelite descent. That you truly can establish that you're part of Israel, and you're part of this tribe, and you're part of this clan, and you're part of this family. So that's what's going on in those 2 extended passages. You're determining Israelite descent. Now again, back to the numbering, the census taking that we get in Revelation 7 with the 12,000, 12,000, 12,000, 144,000 aggregate. It's some kind of numbering, it's some kind of census taking, but it doesn't seem to be necessarily laying out the duties of the Levites or any tribe, really. And it doesn't seem to be determining their descent as sons of Israel either. Leaves us with number 5. And we won't read it either, it's longer. And this one you may want to read later. It is very interesting. Numbers 1, verses 2 through 46. I'll just spoil it for you and tell you what they were numbering for there, the purpose of the census, and it was Israel-wide census. All tribes were involved except Levites, was determining military strength. We're going to go fight a battle. And this is what Jesus meant when he advised, nobody goes out, no king goes out to fight a battle without first determining, can he win? Does he have enough troops? That's what the numbering was most often for, was to determine military strength. You see a number of census, a number of times that people are counted. It's most often in the Old Testament for this purpose, military purposes, okay? How many men do I have? In total, how many men do I have from each tribe? And there were certain tribes that seemed to have a specialty. For whatever reason, Benjamin had more left-handers, just genetically. And so they were really good at throwing the sling, right? And it would come at you from the left. I guess you were looking for a right, and it came from the left. I'm not sure how that worked, but they were specialists at that. Anyway, determining military strength was the most common use of the numbering. Now we may be onto something, okay? With our listing here, the 12,000, 12,000, 12,000, 144,000. it seems some scholars see it this way. Now, I got to tell you, it's not unanimous. You'll see in a minute why I kind of lean this may be part of what we've got here. I don't think it's all of what we've got here. But some scholars seem to feel that it seems that Revelation 7 census is for military purposes, at least partially. And I lean in the least partially camp. And you're free to see it how you see it, but I'll show you in a moment why I think that may be more correct to say it's partially for military purposes, okay? But it's built on this idea that we see in the Old Testament, and you can read Numbers 1 yourself. It's most often, and there are other times, but most often the numbering in the Bible census is for military purposes, and it seems that that is some of the flavor of this listing we get here in Revelation 7 with the tribes, okay? For military purposes, especially when you consider it with the other mention of the 144,000, which is, let's turn there, Revelation 14, 3 through 4. Now, I told you there are two principal mentions of this company of 144,000, 12,000, 12,000, 12,000. There's two mentions. We're looking at one in Revelation 7, but the one in Revelation 14 sheds some nice light on 7. Take a look, and it's very interesting. But take a look at Revelation 14, 3 through 4. Somebody read that out for us.
They sang, as it were, a new song before the throne, before the four living creatures and the elders. And no one could learn that song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. These are the ones who are not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed from among men, being first fruits to God and to the Lamb.
Okay. So we got another throne room scene, right? The creatures, all the rest. You got another throne room, the Lamb, all the rest. You got another throne room scene. And you've got the 144,000 there. And what we know about them is a couple things that may reinforce this idea that we're looking at this listing and it could be at least partially for military purposes. Because Revelation 14, 3 through 4, what do you have? They're all adult males. Do you see that? Soldiers. Soldier material. Adult males. Okay? Now, I realize in our armed forces we have some very good ladies that serve. But again, we can't look at it through our lens. We've got to look at it through theirs. And when they said soldier, they meant men, right? Deborah would be the one great exception, and she was a great exception. Your namesake, there you go. And you're a great exception, so. Your mother is exceptional, Matt. I hope you noted that. Oh, you don't agree? Anyway, when they talk about these 144,000, they're all adult males. And did you notice there's a reference to their sexual abstinence? Okay? Leon, how did your Bible say it? Not defiled with women? Is it something like that?
It says, these are the ones who are not defiled with women.
Okay. And then I think it specifically says they're virgins, right? Celibate. Okay. Now that's curious. That's curious. Because in ancient Israel, when they went out to war, certain kinds of war, not all battles, but certain battles, when they went out to war, the requirement of the soldiers was that they be sexually abstinent. Now, we could get into why that was, and that wasn't the case for Greek armies. In fact, the Greek armies had a totally different strategy. They encouraged homosexuality in the ranks. Because if you were marching with your partner, you would fight more fiercely because you didn't want your partner. See? Different society, different rules. But in Israel, in ancient Israel, there was a requirement that you be sexually abstinent for that space of time, celibate, if you were on a campaign that was holy, like against the sons of Anakim, the giants, the chaos agents. Okay? Then there would often be this requirement for sexual abstinence for holy warriors. You see? It was part of the preparation for war. You kind of see that in the Bathsheba Uriah relationship, right? He's told to come back. David orders him to come back from the heat of battle, from the front lines, so that he will sleep with his wife Bathsheba and cover his mistake. And then they'll think the baby born is his. He refuses. He won't even go in the house. He sleeps in the doorstep, right? Well, that's part of what we've got here. He felt that he was on a holy campaign. He was a holy warrior at that point. So, what have you got here in Revelation 14? Second mention of the 144,000. You get a little more information. They're all males, soldier age, soldier material, males, and they're sexually abstinent. That ancient requirement for holy warriors, preparation for war. Kind of reinforces the idea, what we see in 14 reinforces the idea in 7 that we're toying with, that this may be, this census taking, this numbering may have been for military purposes. We read these passages like this. 12,000 from the tribe of Judah. 12,000 from the tribe of Reuben. 12,000 from the tribe of Gad. It's like, get to the end of it already. And we don't see the purpose. That may be the purpose for the census taking. That it's getting ready for holy war. Again, with that mention and the details we get in 14 about those that are counted. Okay? We may be looking at preparation for holy war in this, to us, kind of droll and tedious retelling of the tribes. But it's really important. Okay? Again, another case where you got to read slow. You got to think about, why did John purpose this? What's going on here? That may be what's going on here. Here's another little interesting tidbit that may be something John was pulling from as well. We know he pulls from the Old Testament and he repurposes that. But he's also, like a lot of people in his day, like Paul would have been, like Jesus would have been, like a lot of people would have been, he's very familiar with all of this Second Temple literature, or at least the ideas that are floating around. The biggest catch of Second Temple literature that has been found so far, we know as the Dead Sea Scrolls. You've heard that. We've talked about that before. And one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, in fact, it's probably the most famous of the Dead Sea Scrolls, is one called the War Scroll. The War Scroll. And interestingly enough, what's going on in the War Scroll, one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, is it's warfare. Preparation for warfare, and warfare is going on. And in the War Scroll, you've got a war between gods and humans. That's what's happening. B'nai Elohim, bad ones. Some of them are bad ones. Some of them are good ones. Some of the humans involved are bad, and some of the humans involved are good. There's this dichotomy, this binary. And interestingly enough, you've got humans and divine beings on both sides. Okay? The good side, the bad side. The godly side, the dark side. This war between gods and men. Okay? You got this mix. That's what's going on in the War Scroll. Causing some Bible scholars to refer to this passage in 7 as the Christian War Scroll. Especially if you put it with what we just saw in Revelation 14. Some describe these passages together as the Christian War Scroll. Reinforcing that what we're looking at here, what John is seeing in this preparation for holy war, more than being an actual land campaign, we may be looking at a depiction of spiritual warfare. or we may be looking at both. At some point future from our time, there could be this war. But for sure, it seems to be a reference to spiritual warfare. Okay? And that makes what we're going to look at very usable for us, not just in the future. And John was thinking about the future, and he was thinking about how are we going to get through this, but it also makes it very usable and relevant for today. Are there spiritual warfares going on today? All the time. In the heavenlies? All the time. Can we have some effect on that? Yes, we can. Are we totally at the mercy of those malevolent divine beings? Not when we belong to Jesus. You see? So, like the Dead Sea Scrolls War Scroll, we've got this conflict between gods and men going on, divine beings and men, that involves good divine beings and fallen divine beings. That involves healthy ones and involves corrupt ones. And involves healthy followers of Jesus and corrupt followers of the enemy. Okay? So what we may be looking at here, a little bit this week, but mostly next week, may be very, very usable for us, okay, in our prayer life and in other ways. But that better-known scroll, the War Scroll, if you see it referred to in scholarly literature, if you have a good annotated Bible, sometimes in the margin, it's referred to as 1QM. It's the Qumran Scroll. 1QM is what it's known as, the War Scroll. It's been called the War Scroll. Gods and men war. People on both sides. Divine beings on both sides. Okay? Now, let's kind of wrap this part up. The first thing that stands out is this numbering, this census thing that's going on. The mention of the 12 tribes in our chapter 7, it seems to be something about military purposes, and we've kind of looked at that. And by the way, next week, we're going to pursue this military line. And there is very possibly, especially when we look at the involvement of Leviticus, or the Levites rather, in this listing. We'll talk about that in a minute. It may possibly have something to do with what are known as the Watchers in the book of Enoch, one of those Dead Sea Scroll documents. The Watchers, who are divine beings that have bad intent. Okay? So anyway, we'll get into that next week. Okay? But what we're looking at here may be some kind of preparation for war. The author is insistent on this equal number thing, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes. And what that may mean is that mention of the 12 tribes, the military thing, and here's where I say that may be part of it, but here may be the other part of it. It may point to the restoration of Israel. That's why you've got these 12 tribes, but you've got the equal representation, 12,000, 12,000, 12,000. So the mentioning of these 12 tribes that we might find a little bit tedious, it may be pointing not only this listing, this counting for military purposes, but we may be looking at something here that's hinting at the restoration of Israel, which would be huge. Israel restored. Back to Paul, Romans 11, all Israel will be saved. That may be what we see starting to gel here with this mention of the 12 tribes and the equality of numbers here. Now, I got to tell you, good scholars, they differ on this. Good scholars on both sides, they differ. They break into two camps. The idea that what we're looking at in this listing is military, but then there are others that think it's restoration. I have a feeling it may be a bit of both. I think John may be pointing us, trying to get us to see it's not one or the other, but it's both, by the way he's repurposed it here. So let's spend just a few moments on the tribes, okay? Which is the second thing that stands out here. This whole tribal arrangement. And let's see what that is all about. You've got, if we're right in saying that the listing of the 12 tribes and the equality of numbers is pointing to this hope of Israel's restoration, and there are a lot of texts, and I'll give them to you next week, in the Old Testament, in Second Temple literature, in apocryphal books like Second Maccabees, which is included in some people's Bibles, in Tobit, which is included in some, in documents like First Enoch, which we looked at a little bit last week. There's even a mention in what's called the Shemone Esrei, which is a prayer that is recited still every day by Orthodox Jews. It's also known as the Amida, which means the standing prayer. You recite it standing, and you've got this one time where you bow and you step up and you step back and you bow. Anyway, there are 18 different petitions in the Shemone Esrei, the Amida. Actually, there are 19, but they call it 18. But there's actually 19. I don't want to get into it, but this happens a lot in Judaism. Things get labeled and then they get added to, but they still keep the old name. Anyway, there are these petitions, and in one of the petitions, it talks about this tribal arrangement and why the 12 tribes are included. Anyway, we'll look at some of that next week, but let's just spend a few moments on the tribes here and see why. We've got some peculiarities, and I alerted you to a couple that are going to be very easy to see. So let's kind of go through this. Number one, the order that we've got here in 7, with Judah, with Reuben, with Gad, Asher, Naphtali, and so on, the inclusion of Levi. If this is a military thing, why do we have the priests? And as I said, in verse 8 is the mention of Joseph. But you've also got Manasseh, but you don't have Ephraim, which Ephraim and Manasseh equals Joseph, right? And you don't have Dan. He's been dropped for some reason, not invited to the party. But the point is, number one, that the order here is not like any other listing in the Bible. And there are lots of listings of the tribes. We looked at a few of them, and some of those long passages that we didn't look at that deal with numbering. This list is not like any of the others. It's not like any other tribe list, not even close. For one thing, you've got Judah first, and that is unusual. So it doesn't correspond to any other list that is in the Bible or that is in any other literature. And one of the most significant facts is that Judah is at the head of the list. Now, there's one time in the Old Testament when Judah is at the head of the list, when they're listing them geographically, and they start in the south. Judah was the southernmost tribe. When they finally settled, the area of Judah was in the south. Where Jerusalem is, that was part of Judah, later called Judea. It's where we get the word Jew, because when they came back from captivity, many of the tribes did not come back, but Judah came back in some force. And so that whole area began to be called Judea. And the whole people, no matter what your tribe, began to be called Jews, mostly by the Romans. That's where the term comes from. But this order with Judah at the beginning, it is very unusual, except for that case where they're listed south to north. Outside of that, this Revelation 7, and there are other geographical listings in the Old Testament, this doesn't look anything like any of the others. Okay, so the order, one of the peculiarities here is the order, and it's easy to see, is not like any other not like any other tribe list that we have in the Old Testament. It's not like any other tribe list that exists anywhere else. The one time that Judah is listed geographically, top of the list, there is one other case where Judah is listed first, and that's when they set up the camp, and Judah is closest in the military order. He's closest to the tabernacle. Okay? But again, this is not like any of those. So you got a little military flavoring there. Maybe that's why Judah's listed first, because one of the military listings, he's listed first, guarding the tabernacle. So there is the military angle there, possibly. Again, I think what we're looking at is spiritual warfare more than anything else. But that's the strange order. Number 2 is the inclusion of both Joseph and Manasseh. Somebody take a look in and there may be an explanation for this. The explanation for Judah being first, maybe it's a tip of the hat to the military thing. But this inclusion of Joseph and Manasseh seems to be addressed in Ezekiel 37. And this may be what John is repurposing here. And we'll start to wrap it up with this. We'll do 3 and 4 next week. But I want you to see this, because a lot of people say, what's going on here? Well, let's see what's going on. Somebody read Ezekiel 37, 15 through 23. Who's got it?
Again, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, As for you, son of man, take a stick for yourself and write on it, for Judah and for the children of Israel, his companions. Then take another stick and write on it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all of the household of Israel and his companions.
No mention of Manasseh.
Then join them to another for yourself into one stick, and they will become one in your hand. And when the children of your people speak to you, saying, Will you not show us what you meant by these? Say to them, Thus says the Lord God, Surely I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel, his companions, and I will join them with it, and the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they will be one in my hand. And the sticks on which you write will be in your hands before their eyes. Then say to them, Thus says the Lord God, Surely I will take the children of Israel from among the nations, wherever they have gone, and will gather them from every side and bring them into their own land. And I will make them one nation in the land on the mountains of Israel. And one king shall be king over them all. They shall no longer be two nations, nor shall they ever be divided into two kingdoms again. They shall not defile themselves any more with their idols, nor with their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions. But I will deliver them from all their dwelling places in which they have sinned, and will cleanse them. Then they shall be my people, and I will be their God.
Okay, it's pretty obvious what we've got in Ezekiel 37 is a restoration of Israel passage. Okay? We don't have time to untangle it all, but it's pretty clear that's what we've got. Okay? You've also got this odd mention of Joseph instead of Ephraim and Manasseh. Just like you got this odd mention of Joseph in the Revelation 7 list. So there may be something that John is wanting us to see here. Ephraim and Manasseh, as we kind of wrap this up, we know them. They're both Joseph's boys, right? Born in Egypt. And they're grafted into Israel. That's what in Genesis 48 scene, old man Jacob, old grandpa Jacob is doing when he crosses hands to bless them. Is he grafting them into Israel? Just like Joseph was in Israel, now your boys are in Israel. Okay? These boys born in Egypt, they're in Israel. And in effect, he's essentially adopting them. Jacob. He's adopting Ephraim and Manasseh, his grandsons. Now you're in Israel, okay? Just like all the rest. And that's why you often see this pairing of Ephraim and Manasseh occupying the Joseph slot. That's why you don't see a tribe of Joseph in the land. You've got it in Ephraim and Manasseh who were adopted, okay, and brought into Israel. But here in 37, you've got both Joseph and Manasseh. Okay? So what happened, in Revelation 7, so what happened to Ephraim? Okay? It's never really explained. It's unusual. It's unprecedented. That's not too strong a word for it. That you have Joseph and Manasseh in a tribal list and you don't have Ephraim. Okay? It hasn't happened before. Now, in Ezekiel 37, what you find is references to Joseph there too, because in Ezekiel 37, we're talking about that restoration, that reunification of the tribes. So you're going to find Joseph there, but Joseph is talked about in ways that would be associated with Ephraim other places in the Old Testament. So maybe, as we draw this down, a reader of what John is doing here, when he encounters Joseph in the list in Revelation 7, is going to think Ephraim. Just like it's implied in 37 of Ezekiel. Maybe the reader of Revelation 7 is going to see Joseph and think Ephraim. He's included. So you kind of have an Ephraim and Manasseh anyway with the mention of Joseph. And you kind of are looking for that symmetry, which may help to explain why Dan gets kicked out. Because we've got to keep 12. We can't have 13. And it may be just that much. Because preserving that, which conveys the message, Israel restored, the tribes restored. Okay? That may be it. We're going to end there because we could keep going. So next time we'll pick up because we've got a couple more reasons for these peculiarities here in the thing that stands out, which is this tribal arrangement that you see in the listing of all the tribes. And then we'll be able to figure out who are the 144,000, okay? Who they are. And are they especially protected? And that's what we'll really focus on next time, okay? Just who they are and are they protected and why are they protected and how long are they protected. So anyway, we'll stop there. Well, let's pray. We've covered a lot of material, a lot of content here tonight. Again, there's a lot of fog around the 144,000. As I said, whole movements have been led astray with their thinking on this. There's a lot of fog. There's a lot of mystery. I think some of it caused mystery around who they are. But there's some things that are fairly obvious, and we looked at a couple obvious things that stand out. One of them is that this tribal arrangement is conveying something about the restoration of Israel, and that the numbering, the census thing, there's something military about that. So we're getting set up to look at some holy warriors here. So, Father, thank you for your love and mercy, your grace and goodness. Thank you for your word, your incredible word. Lord, we are at a disadvantage with your word, Lord, because we're not as keen on your word as certainly John was. So help us, Lord, to think your thoughts after you as we read through, as we think and weigh it out. Lord, help us not to go astray. Keep us true to your word. Lord, we want to see you in your word. We want this to truly be a revelation of Jesus Christ. Because, Jesus, we want to know you better. We want to know you in ways we've never seen you before. And so lead us and guide us. We thank you for your precious word. Lord, be with us all as we go home. Keep us safe on the way. Give us a great night of rest. Fill our dreams with thoughts of you, and let the first thing we think of in the morning be you. Lord, we love you and thank you.